All right. Hi everyone. Welcome to today's Learn and Share. Today we have Big Bagger from Hypercert, and he will walk us through the Hypercert protocol. Maybe some demo, some point. I hope. At a given time during the presentation, I will ask you to mute yourself if you don't mind, so the sound quality can keep better. If you wanna just ask question, you can use the text channel here. And before we begin, I would like to know, no ruler, no state. Before we begin, I would like to know, anyone know about Hypercert here? If you know, you can hit the fire icon or thumbs up. No. Okay, one thumbs up. Few thumbs up. All right. So I can. So Big Baker, that's your audience today. So I will give a microphone to Big Baker.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Charlie, for the introduction. Thanks, y'all, for having me and being interested in learning more about hypercerts. There are a lot of people, or some people that have heard about hypercerts, but it's also still a little bit of like an abstract concept. So what I'm gonna try to do today in the 45-ish minutes that I have is gonna speed run through Ethereum, through hypercerts, what they are, how they work, and what the larger vision is. And hopefully I can pace this well enough so that I can also show you actually how to use the application and what actually happens in the backend. I don't think the problem is my velocity of speech, but I'm gonna try to be clear in everything that I'm saying at the same time. If you have any questions, just put them in the chat. We can scroll back at the end, and if I'm going too fast or if you cannot hear me anymore, just speak up. Okay, let's get started. So, starting with a mouthful, hypercerts are an on-chain primitive at the foundation of a scalable, interoperable, and transparent funding ecosystem for impact, ranging from community services to AI alignment. Like I said, that's a mouthful, but in its core, hypercerts is a on-chain primitive that's designed for a funding ecosystem for impact that's scalable, interoperable, and transparent. So you could see it as a primitive for impact funding on-chain. That's still a little bit vague, but if you look at what a hypercert really is, it's simply an account of actions that have happened or have had a positive impact or expected to have a positive impact. The easiest way to say is a declaration of who did what and when. And here you see an example of a game forest hypercert. Game forest is a product or community organization that is involved with biodiversity data and does a lot of measurements, a lot of different stages. And they minted this hypercert in September 2 years ago. Well, at least that's when they did the work. So why are we building this? So what's really the problem that we're trying to solve for? If you've been involved in grants funding, you might have noticed that there's a little gap there, because we do have funders and we do have contributors, and we do have funders that give grants to the contributors. The contributors create their work, and maybe they produce impact, but we don't really know. Right? It's not really clear what is the feedback loop between the funding that we give, the work that people are doing, and the impact that they achieve, and by proxy, the impact of the funding that you're giving. So Hypercerts tries to build an ecosystem where we can take a different approach to this problem. So if we go back to the fact that we have funders and contributors, what we introduce in the mix is that contributors can create an hypercert. So the impact claim that says who did what and when. That means that the funders can actually look at the hypercerts about what people say that they did, when, and what they did. That allows us to actually map work that contributors are doing to hypercerts. So the funders have like a central point of data where they can look. If somebody says this is what I did, then they know where to look to how to find what they actually really did. The work of the contributors hopefully still has impact, but we want to be able to quantify this. So what we need to introduce in this storyline is evaluators. Evaluators could be a third party, but it could also be they could be closely related to the funders, or they could even be the contributors that self-attest or provide certain types of data. We'll get to this later, but ideally you have a smorgasbord of evaluators, and you can basically, for the type of work or impact that you want to evaluate, you can look at the type of evaluation that you're looking for. I see that Laura's in the room, and I know that this is her thing. The evaluators will produce an impact evaluation pointing to the hypercert. So that means that we have work connected to a hypercert, and we have the evaluation of the impact connected to the hypercert. The theory is that this signals funders on which hypercerts to fund, and that indirectly also means that the funders get a metric, or they get data on what are they funding, what is the work that it's related to, and what is the impact that it achieves. And ideally, we'll see a marketplace of different maybe tiers or type of funders that exchange hypercerts, and maybe even like in different stages. This is all like what I was explaining is mostly the retroactive, right? So I did work, and because I did work, I can declare my impact, or people can evaluate it, yada, yada, yada. But the interesting thing is that when you're a contributor that has positively evaluated hypercerts, we're basically building a reputation system for contributors and the work that they do, which should make it more attractive to also start thinking about anticipating impact. And when we can anticipate impact, you also make it interesting to start working with prospective funding. So in our space, we're obviously working very hard on retroactive funding, but it's also because even though that's a very difficult problem, looking back is still easier than looking ahead. But now we can actually have a provenance of the impact that people have, and then when they apply for grants, we can see, oh, this is kind of what you do, and this is your domain, you're really good at it. So maybe we want to give you a grant compared to some random anon that says, I'll fix it. So how's it going with hypercerts? This is a Tune dashboard that I updated this morning. And what's interesting to see is that there's a bunch of blue peaks in the bottom right corner. What we've been doing is that we've been working closely with Gitcoin. And for every Gitcoin round, we reach out to the round projects or the applicants. And we gave them opportunity to mint the hypercert, so that when people actually donated by sending, let's say, DAI or wrapped ETH or whatever into the grant application, after the round ended, they will receive a fraction of a hypercert. So actually, they get something back for their donation. This is why you see these blue peaks, because every blue peak is like every 3 months, and this is in the same cadence as the grants rounds. In case you're curious what the red peak is, this is somewhere around the timeline where Gitcoin Passport said, what we'll do is we'll support hypercerts. But because hypercerts, and we'll get back to it later, at this moment is simply minting a claim, that was very attractive for people that want to farm high Gitcoin Passport scores to start minting random hypercerts. Even though you see that we minted more than 54,000 hypercerts, you can, it's fair to challenge which ones are really valid. And this brings us back to the whole point that we need evaluations in this ecosystem. This is nice to see. This is an overview of some of the hypercerts that have been minting under the grants round. So you see Ethers, Autoscan, you see Bankless DAO, Web3 Beach, and a whole bunch of different projects. So what are we really building at the moment? What is the vision? We, as the Hypercert Foundation, we lay the foundation for the Hypercerts protocol as a primitive in the whole funding ecosystem. So we developed the protocol for minting, and we developed the marketplace for trading. On top of that, we offer tooling in the form of SDKs, but you could also utilize different tooling because, and we'll get back to it later, a hypercert is basically an on-chain contract. So anything that you can do on-chain that's reasonably compliant with 1.1.5 tokens, you can do with hypercerts. Then there's applications and integrations. And on the highest use cases, but we are taking the bottom-up approach where we want to empower parties in our ecosystem or in the impact funding ecosystem to use hypercerts as a primitive. So how does it really work? What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to just take the diagram that we've seen before, this one, and I'm going to map it to the tools that we're building so you can see kind of how it all fits together in this hypercert ecosystem that we're building. The first part is that we have contributors that create a hypercert to declare the type of work that they intend to do or that they have done. For this, we created the hypercert minter contract. That's here's a link on Optimism. I'll share the link to the presentation afterwards. That allows you to mint, create allow list, split hypercerts, merge them, burn them, and transfer them. I'll get back to the splitting and merging later because it's a very interesting detail, but I first want to get you to the high level. And then if you look at the funders, there are a few things that we are building for. One of them is the Hypercert Exchange, which is basically a fork of LuxRare protocol, where we took out things that we don't need and we added a layer to support hypercerts. This allows you to buy, sell, bid on hypercert or hypercert fractions, and they support multiple strategies. So you could think about a direct sale or a fractional sale or even a Dutch auction. Alternatively, what we've done in the past is basically connecting to different grants flows. So the most recent example that I can give you that I worked on myself is for GG19. We work with the Greenpill network with Rake Guild, and we set up a one-off app that allowed Greenpill members to mint hypercerts. These hypercerts would then be part of their chapter and a chapter round. So you could, in the Greenpill app, you could actually see what is the work that the Greenpill chapters have done. The theory here is, but this needs another iteration, is that this allows local chapters to actually fund hypercerts on the local level. And on the global level, you can fund the Greenpill network for the impact that they funded. So we're creating like a funding flywheel that's supported by hypercerts. Voice deck will happen this quarter, but I'm just very excited to do this. I'm a big fan of Devansh and the work that he's doing. So I'm really looking forward to this integration. Lastly, evaluations. Evaluations is a difficult beast because there's not one gold standard for evaluations, and I believe there never will be, which is fine because we all work for decentralization and we appreciate, at least I assume we appreciate the Bazaar approach. So this is also the approach that we are taking here. In this quarter, we will focus on working on evaluations, which means that we will first support the parties that we already worked with in making evaluations. So that means when a Gitcoin grant, Gitcoin can actually say this hypercert was part of GG19, and this hypercert that looks exactly the same wasn't. It's basically a duplicate. So we can at least make them true or false. We can identify duplicates, and then we can start growing this, because once we have this pattern down on, okay, how do we want to point evaluation to hypercerts, we're gonna really double down on EAS, because EAS is simply everywhere and they provide one simple service, and that is a registry of schemas, which means that if we can support a registry of schemas, other people can provide the schemas, and via their whole EAS infrastructure, we can just point to a whole different set of evaluation data sets because they all point to a hypercert. So as long as we can define the base schema that says, okay, if you want to point to a hypercert for evaluation, we need this information from you, then we can work with LoRa or Open Source Observer or Voice Stack to say like, okay, give me your data. Let's make it a nice schema, and then other people can use the schema as well. Or if you don't agree with the schema, you can make your own, but just match the standards and surface the information. And I'm really excited about that we're going to do this year. So this once again brings everything together. We have tooling for contributors, we have tooling for funders, and we're working on the tooling for evaluations. And this way, we are working on the Hypercerts ecosystem. What tooling are we providing? I know this is a little bit messy. It's just for the concept. Is for the contributors and the minting, we're providing the Hypercerts SDK. For the marketplace, we're providing the marketplace SDK, but they are very closely related, but they just have different utilities. And for the evaluation, it will probably be the Hypercerts SDK, and then with some EAS flows supported out of the box. So this was my speed run into what are we doing with Ethereum. Does anybody have any questions right now, or shall I start with a little demo?
Feel free to unmute yourself and ask question. We have flag structure here.
Okay. Well, if nobody's any questions, then I'll start with a little demo. I wasn't really sure if I wanted to dive into the code, so I'll first just start with, okay, let's mint the hypercert and let's see what happens, and then we can take it from there. So we provide hypercerts.org on testnet and on Optimism and on Cello. The testnet is Apolia because Gurley is deprecating this month. And here you can simply create a new hypercert. So this is the demo for PSE. And this is arbitrary, but this should be 20 in this app. Example.com. It's me, and it's PSE. And we can provide an allow list. I know I'm just filling in some fields right now, but while we're waiting for the mint, I'm going to explain to you what they're actually doing. So the allow list, like I said before with the grant stack, is that the hypercert has been minted, or the grants round, the hypercert has been minted, but a group of people can actually claim these fractions, right? So because I donated, I get a fraction of the Web3 Beach-Clean hypercert. An allow list looks like this. It's basically an address for who receives this and the amount of units that they'll get. So I can provide this allow list here. I said, oh, but I'm the creator and I want to keep 50% for myself for further funding, future funding flows, but the other 50% will be distributed using this allow list. I confirm that contributors gave the permission, and I agree with the conditions as usual. So after I sign this transaction, I will explain a little bit more about what is all the information that we just gave. Waiting for the sign button. Yes, signed. Okay, back to the hypercerts. The hypercerts are a declaration of who they want to win for funding. So one is that we have the impact creator, right? Which in this case was me because I'm into this hypercert. Then we also have the contributors. So let's say, yeah, the Web3 Beach-Clean. I think it's a really easy example because somebody's organizing this, and they are organizing community members to contribute to the Web3 Beach action. So these contributors are the non-financial contributors, and they are expressed here in the contributors list of contributors to work. Oh, it's already done, but I'm gonna finish my story first. So here's the list of contributors, and these are the people that are the non-financial contributors, right? Then you saw the allow list, but the allow list are actually financial contributors. Financial contributors, aka funders. So again, in the GG19 example, you donated to this project. So this is why you're getting a fraction. And you're getting a fraction because you actually send funds to the impact. So this hypercert actually brings three groups together. You have the impact creator or the coordinators, you have the non-financial contributors, and you have the financial contributors. And all of them are represented in this mint. So now we minted this hypercert. And if you go to my hypercerts, you can actually see here the mint that I made. Because this address, 77, is in this allow list here, and I am the creator and just said I get 50%, that means that I get two fractions. Right? And if this is unclear, we can cover this in the questions, but I just want you to understand what the app is actually doing. So you basically get two fractions. You can claim them both. But sign, yeah, you can claim them both. So what actually happens while I'm making this claim? So as a user, I'm using the app that utilizes the SDK that is calling the contract. The contract is aware of the allow list, which is basically a Merkle tree stored on-chain. So we store the root on-chain and you give the proof, and that means that you can create a fraction. Then the contract is aware of the claim, and the claim has data. So it has like metadata, like you've seen with other NFTs, and this metadata then points to the hypercert data. This claim is stored, but it doesn't mean anybody has any tokens. Oh, I'm sorry for that. That doesn't mean that the claim has any tokens, right? So what actually happens during this mint is that the contract is being called to create fractions. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fractions, right? A few for me, a few for somebody else, and another one. These fractions are the things that you actually own. So now when you see that I claim these, and I need to refresh, then with BSE, they show this fraction that I own right now. I own 50.5% because I'm the creator and I made the allow list. And here you basically see a representation of the metadata. The interesting part is that these fractions are semi-fungible NFTs, or no, sorry, semi-fungible tokens. Why are they semi-fungible? Is because what we actually do is if you take the claim, it has a claim ID, for instance, for 10, right? Just follow me. It's 10. Then the fraction gets 11. And then the second fraction gets 12. And then the third, blah, 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 blah. And then the last one has 15. So what happens when you make a new claim is that this one is updated, or we get a new one that has 20. And then it's 21, 22, 25. I think you get the gist. So what this enables us to do is that if you look at the allow list and you get an X amount of units of this hypercert, is I merge 11 and 12, and then they become 16, and they have more units. What I also can do is split them, so I make them a little bit smaller, And then suddenly it's this size and it's this size. The reason why we enable this is that you can actually start, because if you get an hypercert fraction back for the funding that you're doing, you might not want to have a gazillion hypercerts in your OpenSea. So you can basically merge them all on the value that they have. And in the long term, the idea is that you can also split and merge them on the type of impact that they created. So we're doing numbers and value, or like, let's say, financial value, but you can also think about the value of the impact and how that can work together. So if you look here in the app, you can also split it. And that means that I can split this one up in 570. Submit. Waiting music. And what happens during the split is like I explained. So let's say we're taking 15 and a fraction 15 is burned, and then it's made smaller, and then suddenly we're getting 16 and we're getting fraction 17. And you see the same happening here in the app. So now suddenly you have 3 tokens. We haven't enabled the merge button in here yet, but it is, at least on the contract level, it's possible. Let's see. So with this allow list, you saw that this is my allow list and I'm a member here. But what I also did is go to my Hypercerts with a different account. And now you see that I did this already before the demo, and I'm now doing here the same. So this is basically how the distribution of Hypercert fractions works. Sign. This is basically the speed run that I really wanted to give on Hypercert, but I know that I covered a lot of ground, so I wanted to give a little bit more space for having some questions and see how I can help you maybe also use Hypercerts, or if you have any question on how things specifically work, I can easily explain them here right now. I see that Laura posted a bunch of questions. More than me believing there is an easy answer. Is privacy useful for evaluators in terms of not revealing their identity, maybe limiting it to some other proof that demonstrates belonging or potential beneficiaries to that claim of impact? Yeah, I believe it is. I think it makes a ton of sense, because you don't always want to show what somebody did, or you also don't maybe want to reveal that you were that person, but maybe in funding flow, you want to be able that you were involved with this impact, but not in what will exactly. The catchphrase will be ZK Hypercerts, and it will be really exciting. But I do still think that you would still need to have evaluations in that flow, because otherwise it's still an arbitrary claim. If you want to generate reputation, is there a way to use ZK attestations for this? I think it's in this similar kind of answer. I think ZK makes a ton of sense. I think you can also then think about a ZK flu where you can prove that you, for instance, have an X amount of hypercerts that have been attested with certain positive or negative value. When you actually get to quantifiable metrics, so for instance, VoiceDAC, Devansh is using the BC index. You could think about having X amount of hypercert that have a certain positive, the certain positive BC value, or maybe in total. Have hypercerts thought of ZK or encrypted attestations for the evaluations, so only funders have this information displayed? Let's see. I don't think we thought about this, but I think this is fair for the whole ZK domain. I think we're still establishing the whole ecosystem, and then we can think about adding things like ZK or maybe using something like Shutter or other flows. Can I think of hypercerts as shares or bonds? No, hypercerts are not a financial instrument, but they do facilitate funding flows. So because there's no like profit expectation or anything in hypercerts. What we basically say is we lean into the reputation or the prestige economy, where you as a funder actually get something back for the funding that you distributed. What makes a claim more legitimate than another? Question by Andy. I think that's the only solid answer. I mean, anybody can make a claim. You could even make a claim that says, "Hey, I am an anon address from Vitalik, but I really am Vitalik, but it doesn't really mean anything, right?" So we need people to attest. I do think there's, and I talked about this before, I do think there's a whole range of evaluation metrics that you should use, depending on if you're the Green Pill network and you want to know if people were actually in the same room, or if you're Gainforest and you actually want to attest to the quality of the data that's being collected and being offered into the data marketplace. Who decides what's a duplicate and what should be divided? The decider is the evaluator, but it doesn't make it true, right? And this is the difficult part of evaluations. You can also evaluate the evaluator. So if Andy says, "Can you mint a duplicate one?" and I said, "No, that's not true," then we both have 1-1, right? So it doesn't really change anything. So probably the evaluator has reputation, or there's other people also attesting to that. What I think will be exciting in the future is when we get to a point of something like validator DAO, where you basically have a DAO that's capable of coordinating evaluations or validations, but also having a conflict resolution flow, and maybe even having sub-DAOs that specialize in specific properties. I'm mentioning DAOs because I'm just a big fan of DAOs. And I think in this decentralized marketplace or ecosystem that we're building, DAOs have a natural fit. And who decides the split of the shares? That's also arbitrary. Basically, the creator of the hypercert determines what is the split of the shares. So as you've seen in this allow list, I just made a lot of random numbers. In the case of the GG19 or Bitcoin grants rounds in general, they basically use the donation amount that's received. Yeah. What if several people claim the impact for the same thing, organizing an event that helped onboard X amount of people? Yeah, I think we just that. I think there's always a trust assumption in everything that we do, even if you say we are trusting we're trusting the validators, we're trusting people building the open source software, and in this case, we're also trusting certain evaluators more than others. But it doesn't make them right per definition, which is interesting. Why is it called hypercert and not funding cert or share cert? Okay. There's a little bit of the background. So hypercert was... Okay, maybe one step back even further. I got involved with hypercert because I was Shelling Point Amsterdam, and there was from Milwaukee, there was a call to action on quantifying or measuring impact of DAOs, or impact DAOs, measuring, quantifying impact. And we made we responded to our RFP, and at the same time, Protocol Labs reached out and said, well, if you want to think about quantifying impact, you might also want to be able to know what is the impact or what is the work that has been done. So instead of impact certificate, they create these hyper certificates that have the properties of a unique object in hyperspace. And this hyperspace was designed as a 6-dimensional space that declares work, impact, time frame of work, time frame of impact, contributors, and users' rights for the creator. So basically, it's a unique object in a hyperspace. The challenge was that if you want to use a protocol like this for everything, it also needs to be very cheap. And if you're gonna put all of this data on chain in an immutable, unique manner, it's not cheap anymore. So in the first instance, we built for mainnet, but then we decided first we did a refactor, and second it was still too expensive, so we moved to Optimism, leading into the benefits of layer 2s. But it's a hypercert because in theory it's a unique object of work and impact. Nightmare is asking about evaluation criteria and how evaluators are selected. I think this points to the same answer as before. I think evaluators should be anybody that wants to evaluate, and then we can evaluate if they are suitable for making these evaluations, or maybe they know something that we don't. The approach that we're taking, like I said before, is that we'll be first figuring out how to work with EAS in a manner that we don't get a lock-in. So if we want to go to more layer 2s than where EAS is, we need to have a way to still provide the same attestation evaluation system. Then we can work with close partners that we're also gradually reaching out to start working with their evaluation schemas and how they want to provide evaluation data. And usually I take the rule of 3, and if you do things a few times, then you find the best pattern, the most generalizable pattern, and then we can open up for anybody providing any evaluations. That doesn't mean that we are able to support all of them, and this will be a very interesting process because we need to get to some sort of governance process where we can say, well, these are the evaluations that we let's say these are blue chip, and don't hold me accountable in this framing, but we can say like, oh, these are like the blue chip. We know these are this is the high quality data that we're looking for. But then we should still be able to surface all the other evaluations, saying, well, here are all the reviews that are blue chips. But if you look at the masses, nobody else is agreeing. And this is also valuable information. We need to be able to support this. So I think my answer to your question, how are evaluators selected, is they are not, but we do need to grow into this process. Charlie, I'm curious to know about evaluation attestations. As the financial drafted out VoiceX V1 evaluation, BC ratio, what are the things we need to do in order to be a standard scheme? So there's not really a standard scheme, but we need to figure out how we can connect those evaluations to hypercerts, but that we can also connect all other evaluations to hypercerts. So on a technical level, one thing that we thought about is that with EAS, you also get a resolver contract. That means that you can actually pass the evaluation to a contract that says, oh, yeah, you're allowed to do this, valid or not. This also allows us to basically surface any evaluation that is pointing to hypercerts, because we don't need to say, oh, you're supporting our schema. You can just basically say, as long as you pass your evaluations through our contract, we will index them. And this is like the free-for-all approach, and I'm not sure if it's healthy, but it's one solution that we're refining right now. So if you want to be a standard schema, I think basically the minimal requirement will be point to a hypercert and point to the data of the hypercert that you are evaluating, and then just do your thing. And then we need to be able to maybe just show the data in an external source or something else. Holland, could evaluators also receive a hypercert for their contribution to hypercert, or is that too recursive? No, I don't think that's recursive. I think that makes sense. I also think that it's sense to make hypercerts for hypercerts if you want to think about funding open source software and public goods. But it does make it very interesting. And if you think about validator DAO, when you have a DAO that has a lot of members that have positive attestation or evaluations on their track record or in their reputation, then that also increases the credibility of that DAO. So I do think there needs to be a feedback loop to evaluators, because you also want to be able, and this is also a little bit difficult with the whole marker problem. You might also want to be able to say this is not a good evaluator. Let's see. Dayun, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it correctly. Dayun, would Protocol Guild be a good fit for Hypercert, or is it already too famous? No, I think it makes a shit ton of sense. And I think there are a bunch of other projects where it also would make a ton of sense to start thinking about hypercerts. You can think about IPFS. You can think about the whole EVM. You can also think about research that has been very impactful, but no, that's no but. Or research that has been very impactful. I think, and I've had this conversation multiple times. I think if you look at impact funding in general, the one of the major milestones that we can achieve is that when somebody opens their email or goes into GitHub, they basically get a banner that says, "Wow, thank you for creating IPFS 01. We did a funding round based on the work that you did and the impact that you achieved. Your funds are available. Please log in with your GitHub account." I mean, when we're at that point, we bridge the whole spaceships that we're building in our space to the people that are doing the work or have already been doing the work in the past. So maybe there's a long-winded answer to yes to Protocol Guild and yes to many other products that have been very impactful in the past. All right. There is some more information being shared about hyperstructures. Probably can mint another hypercert for evaluations. Yeah. True. Yeah. So what I did is I gave you a speed run of hypercerts. Hypercert in an impact funding ecosystem. The goal of hypercerts is that we want to be a primitive or basically the data layer for impact funding and work that people plan to do or have done. We rely heavily on our ecosystem because a hypercert in and of itself is simply a claim, but we need evaluations, and by evaluations you incentivize funding, and this is the whole value loop that we're trying to build for. We ran over a bunch of questions on how to use evaluations and what it means to have hypercerts. I'd be happy to also dive a little bit more into the code or some more technical details if people find it interesting. And otherwise, we can just chill and jam a little about things you want to do with hypercerts. So feel free to unmute if you have any questions or comments.
That's a typical silence again. It was very helpful, Bebecker, your presentation. Yeah, I wonder if anyone wanna just dive in more to code. We have 10 more minutes left. Or you guys maybe have other question, you can think later, and you can tag in Bebecker in our channel, ask any question or whatever you feel comfortable.
And if you don't, go ahead, Ayun.
Yeah, maybe I think it's fundamental question. How could we measure the impact of hypercert protocol itself?
Good one. I don't think I have an answer right now. Looking at the OP Retro PGF round that happened recently, you can also see how they are distributing a lot of funds to a lot of impactful organizations. And I think they'll also get the recursive problem, because in the future, you should be able to also reward the funder, right? So if impact equals profit and they fund the impact, and by their funding, there's more impact, then they should have the same loop back. And I think for Hypercerts, that also makes sense, but we are building as a public good. But what's interesting is also to think like, oh, we have a marketplace, and maybe we can also think about getting close to impact equals profit in a way that can. But I wouldn't have a measure right now. Maybe you could look in the future and value that has flowed through all the hypercerts in the marketplaces.
Besides the Gitcoin passport, are there any other services or projects that are kind of using this, using Hypercerts as a reputation, as like a source of reputation, or within reputation, I don't know, systems that you know of?
No, not yet. And I personally feel that this also has to do with the fact that anybody can mint a hypercert, and I also think that this was that this didn't really help the Gitcoin passport ecosystem, because anybody can just mint one. So there's no reputation really tied to it yet. But if you think about, let's say the Web3B screen again, and you're a contributor on there, or you own a fraction, you can connect, for instance, with Guild XYZ, and Guild XYZ supports on-chain data, and then you can start using it for instance, community onboarding or other things. But at this moment, I don't think anybody else really using Hypercerts for reputation.
All right. If no one has question or comment or idea, I think we can close for today. That sounds all good for you guys. You can hit the thumbs up. All right. Seems a few thumbs up. Yeah, so thank you everyone coming, and lastly, Baker share a link or join the Telegram. This is Hypercerts Telegram, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, please share a link too.
And this is the and this presentation, and I also, for the developers in here, I added some resources where you can find a monorepo and a demo app, and we also provide a starter app.
Cool.
And the starter app you should be able to fork it, and then it just runs Next.js with Chakra, and it has the SDK embedded in it, and it has a simple minting form. So you can just start playing around with the SDK and some mints and other things.
That sounds great. All right, so thank you, Baker, for your presentation, and everyone coming. We will close out today. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye.
Thanks, all. Bye.
Bye.